So one of the things that I love about having a YouTube channel and being able to have an outlet to talk about movies and my love for collecting and all of that is to kind of talk about the history and movies that I love and movies that get me excited that hopefully other people might not be maybe too keen on that maybe they're gonna check out and stuff. And there's been this really cool idea going around YouTube, and I figured I'd give it a go. I've seen a couple creators on here. Recently, it was Jeff from Films at Home who did this, but this is my, I guess you can call it favorite film of every year I was born, and I guess I'm dating myself here, but I am 31. I was born in October of 1991, and of course, growing up, I talked about how my parents had a VHS collection, and then it was DVDs, and then now as a grown adult, it's Blu-rays and 4Ks, and all of that crazy stuff. But I am really excited to talk about all these movies that I love. And here's the thing, right? These are movies that I love. So were there technically better movies made every single year on this list? I'd probably say yes. I mean, I love a lot of movies, so these are just movies to me that are nostalgic, or movies that I tend to go back to, movies that I can genuinely say like I love sitting down and watching this movie for one reason or another. So don't take this as like this is my favorite film from that year because it was an award winner. I don't really care like if I don't love stuff that is specifically big attention or anything like that. So yeah, I guess we're gonna get started. So let's have some fun. So for 1991, the year of my birth, I decided to go with The Silence of the Lambs, and here's why. I mean, technically, on pretty much every single level, this movie is almost perfect, right? But I think the biggest thing to me is how much this film has held up. So many years later. It's been 31 years. Like, it's crazy. This film is still so effective, and in my opinion, every single serial killer thriller is kind of in the shadow of Silence of the Lambs, and there's been a few along the way that have kind of, lightened that shadow. You have Seven, and there's a bunch more, but for me, upcoming, this movie terrified me. There's imagery in here that still this day I look at, and I just have these keen flashbacks of when I was a kid watching that, which I really probably shouldn't have been a kid watching this anyway, but what kid on here didn't grow up with Hannibal Lecter, right? So for 1991, I'm going with The Silence of the Lambs. I can't wait to read the comments on my pick for 1992, but I'm going to be giving it to Mary Lambert's follow up to the Stephen King adaptation, Pet Sematary 2, and I will die on this hill. Like, we can fight to death on our opinions of Pet Sematary 2, but obviously, I grew up, I read Pet Sematary as a kid. I loved it. Still my favorite Stephen King story. But when I was old enough to be going to video stores and making selections, I just kept grabbing Pet Sematary 2. It Mary Lambert, returns to it, and it's been said that this is a little bit more her. There's a bit more of her personality as a filmmaker in this. And I mean, you have Clancy Brown being a nutcase. He changed pretty much my view on eating potatoes forever. One of my favorite sequences was always the dirt bike sequence and just his reaction to it. This movie is absolutely nuts. And if you do a good double feature with the original, and you're unaware of the direction they went in with this, it's kind of a crazy experience. But still to this day, I love this movie. I throw it on all the time. That's why it's my pick for my favorite film of 1992. So, no surprise here for 1993. It's Jurassic Park. I mean, I have a Jurassic Park tattoo on my hand. Like, this movie, and I talked about it in a couple previous videos, but what this movie did for my childhood and has kind of done for me now as a film fan is paramount. There's nothing that will ever be able to impact me in my life as much as Jurassic Park has. It sort of changed the course. I watched this so many times as a kid. I still have that VHS, and still to this day, I can throw this on at any moment. I will be 100% into it. My attention is just there. Everything from, the practical effects. I was a dinosaur lover as a kid. I had the little dino decks that I think they released after Jurassic Park 3. I would run around with that and look at footprints and all that other crazy stuff. So Jurassic Park, my favorite film of all time, is my pick for my favorite film of 1993. I had a tougher time with 1994 than I thought I was going to, and I kind of had to lean on nostalgia a little bit more. But my pick for 94 is going to be Forrest Gump. Dude, this movie over the last 10 years has grown this weird hate community on Reddit, and I get it. It's a product of the time. I mean, 1994, a totally different world, both socially, totally different world, technologically, everything was so different. And Forrest Gump was just that movie for me. I just rewatched this, only a couple weeks ago, and I cried 3 separate times. And for people who kind of grew up in the 90s or even in, the early 2000s, this film is sort of a staple with what it did for pop culture. People who have never even seen Forrest Gump at least know the character, the references and all of that stuff. I mean, this movie it sort of exceeds time. It goes beyond, and I'm perfectly fine with that. I will always have a spot in my heart for Forrest Gump, and that's why it's my pick for 1994. For 1995, I had to lean into what is technically one of the, in my opinion, best thrillers ever made. I mean, even still to this day, and that's going to be Michael Mann's Heat. This movie, so many years later, it now has a 4K release. There's a sequel book. I mean, there's a sequel movie in the works from Michael Mann. The cast here: Al Pacino, Robert De Niro, Val Kilmer. You have Tom Sizemore, Amy Brenneman, Ashley Judd. I mean, Ted Levine's in this. Just a crazy cast. Over a, when you sit down with a 3-hour movie, there is a little bit of concern of how much of that movie is really going to engage you and kind of keep you involved until the third act. And Heat does it all the way through. All the heist scenes are incredible. I mean, the street shootout is unbelievable. Just the little details that they add into it, such as using real guns with blanks and actually just putting microphones around as opposed to replacing the noise. It just amplifies it and it brings you in, and it's engaging. And technically, this is one of my favorite films to throw on and just get sucked into, even though I know, every single beat of it. I'm perfectly okay with that. And that's why it's my pick for 1995, Michael Mann. So 1993 rolls around, we get my favorite film of all time, Jurassic Park. And only 3 years later, we get my second favorite film of all time. And obviously, my pick for my favorite movie of 1996, Jan de Bont's Twister. And I'm shocked that there is actually a sequel being filmed for this right now. That's absolutely crazy. It's kind of blowing my mind. But this movie means just everything to me. I blew through this VHS as a kid. I had a DVD. I practically ruined that. Still to this day, again, kind of like Jurassic Park, there's a magic to this film. The music, I absolutely love the score. I love the choice for the music. There's so much about this movie. Helen Hunt, Bill Paxton, that crew. Erica and I are always kind of shooting lines back and forth and quoting this movie. And every single time I'm driving through areas of cornfields, this movie instantly comes to mind. It's funny, I was just driving the other day, and I was driving past a little tractor repair center, and the first thing that came to my mind was left, right, left, that kind of stuff. So yeah, Twister is just embedded in me, and that's why it's one of my favorite films ever, but also my pick for my favorite movie of 1996. I need the 4K of this ASAP, right now, please. another divisive one for 1997, but the sequel to one of my favorite films of all time, Spielberg's The Lost World Jurassic Park. And I get it. The magic of the first movie is not here. In fact, it's actually pretty faint. But for where I was in life and this movie, it just hit something in me. I mean, I still watch it this day, and I critique it. I mean, I critique the third act and the choice to all of a sudden kind of feature this Godzilla like subplot. It is cool seeing a blockbuster though, but the subplot. Actually, the entire plot of this movie is just sort of like an excuse to make another Jurassic Park movie, but I still greatly appreciate the fantastic blend of practical effects and CGI. I still greatly appreciate, the characters, Ian Malcolm and Sarah Harding, and all of that. And when I sit down and I watch this movie, it's a different feeling than the first Jurassic Park. It's kind of hard to explain, but I still absolutely love it. I don't think it's anywhere near as good as the first, but for me, and at the time in my life, I friggin' love this movie, and I will die on that hill. So, 1997, Lost World Jurassic Park. There's a very obvious theme here for the 90s in Spielberg. Because for 1998, I have Saving Private Ryan. I had the dual VHS of this with the behind the scenes features. And this movie just impacts me like so few war films do. I do love war movies coming from a family of veterans. I do love war films, and I think there's a ton of great ones out there, but Saving Private Ryan just, it's a little bit different. You have that incredible John Williams score, Steven Spielberg's brilliant direction, these very realistic depictions of war, but also, the grief and the character. And that's what's great, is that this movie features a lot of characters that they build fantastic relationships with. And, at the end of the movie, you're rooting for them. And there's also kind of morality at question with why send this group of men out to save one man, to send him home after the death of his brothers. And you can kind of go back and forth on that, and throughout you kind of question that moral choice. But them being led by Tom Hanks, by his character, and everybody kind of involved. You have Tom Sizemore, Captain John Miller, that was his name, I blanked. Being led by Captain John Miller, and the cast and crew. Vin Diesel is in this as an early performance. You have Tom Sizemore in this. I mean, this movie pulls my heartstrings every single time. So well made, technically brilliant, just all around absolutely fantastic movie. And I think for 1998, it's really impressive that no war film since then has really been able to kind of touch it, in my opinion. So my pick for 98, Saving Private Ryan. It looks excellent on 4K, by the way. I just had to throw that in. So for 1999, I had to pick a movie that still is special to me, and that's going to be David Fincher's Fight Club. Ironically enough, the front cover is telling me that I am not special, but this movie confused the hell out of me when I was younger. I didn't really understand this movie until I was, well into my teenage years. But, what this movie has done in pop culture, people who've never seen Fight Club, they understand the reference. They know there's a movie, and they know rule number one, you don't talk about Fight Club. Number two, you don't talk about Fight Club. But, David Fincher, great adaptation of the book here. I think his direction is brilliant. I do think over time, once you kind of know the twist with Tyler Durden and stuff like that, it does kind of lose a little bit of face value. But I watched this so many times when I was younger, and I still absolutely love it. So my pick for 1999 is very clear. It's going to be Fight Club. Into a new decade now. And at this time, the year 2000, teen slashers are pretty alive and pretty well. And my pick is very clear, and it's actually the first Final Destination film. I just rewatched this for the 1 billionth time, probably like a week or so ago with Erica, and it holds up. It's super smart. It has this, the kills are so well constructed that it kind of, it kind of distracts you enough from the very strange plot at hand, because there's some weird plot stuff here, like the FBI investigating him, and there's a great moment with them. I mean, there's weird stuff in here that doesn't make sense, but the point of it being the kills, and they're fantastic. And the fact that, again, pop culture, this movie has kind of transcended just being a film where people get into real life situations, and Final Destination comes to mind. It doesn't matter if it's the first, doesn't matter if it's the truck in the second one, it's the roller coaster in the third. But yeah, Final Destination, Devon Sawa's performance in here, Ali Larter, I fell in love with it this time. I mean, come on. I had a really cool, I think it was like a color shifting Snapcase DVD at that time. But yeah, I mean, I absolutely love this movie. I think the kills are so good. Erica and I had to talk about where the transition is in the bus kill. We kind of had that conversation. We kind of stopped and went frame by frame. I mean, Final Destination is fantastic, and I think it was such a good entry in horror at that time. And now, 2023, we have a sixth Final Destination in the works. So my pick for the year 2000 is Final Destination. There were a lot of really good options at hand for 2001, but had to shout out one of my favorites, Leelee Sobieski, Steve Zahn, Paul Walker in Joyride. After this movie, I never looked at a CB radio the same way again. Not that I ever had a CB radio, but if I was ever in the presence of a CB radio, all I could hear in my head is the candy cane, and Ted Levine's terribly creepy voice. Yeah, I mean, Joyride. If you've never seen Joyride, do yourself a favor and find it. It's a really cool thriller involving a couple teens who kind of mess around with this truck driver, and it's the wrong 18-wheeler truck driver to mess with. It has a fantastic third act. It's a lot of fun. It's tense. I feel like this movie kind of goes missing in the whole road trip horror subcategory. So, yeah, my pick for 2001 is Joyride. I will say, thinking about 2002, I'm just thinking of easier times. It's just something that happens when you get older. You just kind of start thinking about that stuff. But I decided to go with a really fun kind of cult guilty pleasure for me, and that's gonna be Eight-Legged Freaks. Come on, David Arquette, giant spiders that basically talk. I mean, they make crazy noises. Everything about this movie is just absolutely ridiculous, and that's the pure fun of it. It was trying to kind of channel a modern version of a 50s giant insect movie, and they kind of hit on every single level. I remember being so excited when Scream Factory announced the release of this. This is such a cool release. It's actually, I think, more than the film deserves. If you've seen the dirt bike can scene where he literally kicks a tarantula out of the air, this movie isn't really deserving of this kind of a treatment. But it's always been so fun to me. And like I said, just thinking back to easier times in life and I think in the world. So my pick for 2002 is Eight-Legged Freaks. So for 2003, I don't really think there's an easier choice out there. Freddy vs. Jason. This movie was an absolute experience for us. I was, I think, 12, turning 13 when this came out. I didn't see it in theaters. Erica did. And her mom brought her to see it. And there was kind of some surprises in there for her. But I remember going to Blockbuster. There was a full wall section for this movie. I was nervous as hell it was going to be sold out. And yeah, still to this day, I friggin' love this movie to death. I'm actually just buttoning up Slash of the Titans, the whole story behind the decade spanning madness and 13 scripts that were involved in all of this crap. So Freddy vs. Jason is undoubtedly the king of both of these franchises, and it's the final round, and I love it to death. So for 2003, I could never see myself making a different choice than Freddy vs. Jason. So for 2004, I'm going with a movie that emotionally damaged me as a 13-year-old, all the way up even still to now as a 31-year-old, and that's going to be Ashton Kutcher and Amy Smart in The Butterfly Effect. I know what this movie had on people the effect this movie had on people my age even now, because I see it and I hear about it, and I see, I have friends on Instagram who still talk about how much this movie hurt them and how much it still hurts me. I remember I didn't have this in the collection for the longest time, and I found it, and I was like, "Holy shit, I need this movie!" And I brought it home and I turned it on, and I'm like, "God, this movie kills me." It's just, but the whole time travel era of things, there was a little streak there. I don't think it was really done better than Butterfly Effect. Sure, it's dramatic, it's over the top, it gets ridiculous, whatever. This is a pure product of 2004. I mean, it's pretty much a time capsule. You can go back and kind of feel out what '04 was like for a lot of us back then. So my pick is the absolutely heartbreaking, mind-bending The Butterfly Effect. So I was hoping that Cronenberg would be able to make this list. And for '05, I just 2005, I had to go with A History of Violence. This was one of those movies that I saw this kind of before I was really exposed to a lot of David Cronenberg. I was exposed to this even before Eastern Promises, any of that. And I just remember being so shocked by the violence in this movie. It's so hard hitting. And growing older and kind of watching this movie, I learned a new appreciation for it from a character perspective, the emotion behind it. I absolutely love this movie. I think it's really interesting that Cronenberg had this era where he kind of got away from the body horror and was creating these really, really, really incredible dramas. I think that's just incredibly interesting. And the fact that A History of Violence was a part of my history kind of growing up as a film lover, it is super awesome. I absolutely love this movie, and that's why it's my pick for 2005. In 2006, Alexander Aja kind of took the world by storm, and that was with The Hills Have Eyes. Man, I just remember being so beaten down by how brutal this movie was, and I was so surprised at how brutal it was, because at that time I was a fan of the Wes Craven original. So this was, remakes were rampant. Only a couple years before this, you had Texas Chainsaw Massacre. There was just all kinds of remakes happening, and Alexander Aja came out of left field. At the time, I loved High Tension. He came out of left field with The Hills Have Eyes, and I actually prefer this to Wes Craven's original. This movie is so hard hitting. It's so well done. The trailer scene is as intense as it can possibly be. You got Ted Levine being burned up in a tree in the background, all kinds of nasty, disgusting stuff happening in the trailer. And it all accumulates to an awesome third act that I love, and I think the movie balances everything so well. All the characters so well. The casting was great. I mean, this is a movie that still to this day I throw on, and I feel like deep in my nerves. This movie's so hard hitting, especially in the fight. He gets his fingers cut off. Oh man! So yeah, my pick for 2006 is Alexander Aja's remake of The Hills Have Eyes. See, now we're getting to the point where I'm really recalling kind of who I was as a person growing up, in these years. And in 2007, no movie that I love more than Disturbia. DJ Caruso directed a bunch of films that I loved, and Disturbia being this kind of loose remake of Alfred Hitchcock's Rear Window. I absolutely love this movie. It just kind of connected with me in a very strange way. And now, so many years later, I actually watch this movie and I'm like, this movie's beyond nostalgia. It's just a really good little thriller. It's predictable. It's fine. Shia LaBeouf is fun. Everybody kind of plays their role, and I absolutely love, and I am blanking on her name right now. Oh yeah, first of all, David Morse plays a neighbor. Great. Is it Sarah? Yeah, Sarah Romer. Absolutely loved her at the time. And then you have Carrie Ann Moss playing the mom. I remember watching the commentary track with this way back when it was on DVD and I originally owned it. And thinking about the opening scene, how they decided not to show the aftermath of the accident, meaning show the father in any way, and it kind of increasing the emotion of the scene. And that was kind of the era where I really started watching movies to kind of learn the tricks and kind of pick up on little tiny things and how impactful that was for me to learn. Now, when I'm watching movies, I'm watching for little things like that. So, my pick for 2007, one of my favorites of all time, it's got to be Disturbia. Gosh, I remember 2008 when Brian Bertino's The Strangers came out. I just heard so much about this movie. And actually, my parents went to go see it without me, and they were like, oh, you would love this movie. And whatever, a year or so later, I finally saw it. In the midst of ultra violent remakes and kind of the beginning, at this point, we're a couple years into the torture porn thing with Hostile and Saw. In comes this kind of small scale little home invasion horror movie, The Strangers, and it's genuinely unnerving. If you've ever been in your home alone, this movie comes to mind a lot, and it's shot so well. It's done incredibly well. And then you have the iconic moment when they're confronting our three killers, and they ask why, and then you have the infamous "because you were home." I mean, it just doesn't get freakier than that. The whole entire premise of the movie, you have no idea why why our victims are our victims, and then you find out it's just because they were there, and that's terrifying. And that's one of the many reasons why 2008 for me, The Strangers made the biggest impact on me. So a fun little story about my pick for 2009. I actually had this little I called it like a mini theater in my house. I had these cool reclining chairs that had cup holders in the middle. I thought I was the shit. I was like, man, these are cool as hell. And I bought this movie on DVD, and we put on the 3D glasses and watched it, and I never talked to her again. I don't remember her name. I don't know. But that is the remake of My Bloody Valentine in 3D. Man, I actually still have the 3D glasses. Well, I have the 3D glasses for the Blu-ray, but I had them for the DVD. I just remember having a ton of fun with this movie, and this was kind of before I was exposed to the original. So even though I love the original, and I do think it's better than the remake, I was exposed to this before the original. I mean, I knew this was a remake, but at that time, I loved this movie, and I was super stoked when I found this on Blu-ray. So my pick for 2009, oh gosh, the year I went into high school, is My Bloody Valentine 3D. I just realized that I said for 2009 that I was going into high school. No, that was the year I was getting ready to get out. I don't know how that happened, but 2010 came my second favorite heist thriller behind Heist, and one of my favorites of all time, and that is Ben Affleck's The Town in this cool, crazy deluxe edition here. I love the extended cut of this. It's kind of crams in a little bit more drama and stuff, but it's been a long time. Clearly, I just want to say, I know, clearly this movie was heavily inspired by Heat, and that's fine. But I've always loved this movie. I love the characters, Jeremy Renner, Ben Affleck, their relationship in the movie, when they kind of come at a point where it's torn, and there's just, the drama is good. The heist scenes are great. The characters are good enough. I always have a lot of fun when I watch this. There's just something about it that at this time, for a movie like this to come out, I remember watching it for the first time and being like, shit, that was great. And then a couple years later, I finally saw that extended cut, and I was like, man, this is even better. So, my pick for my year of graduation, 2010, the proper timeline, is Ben Affleck's The Town. For 2011, I mean, I don't really think there's a better choice other than Drive in this big, giant Second Sight Films deluxe edition. First of all, so happy this movie finally hit 4K. But yeah, this collector's edition is wild. Nicholas Winding Refn, and you have Ryan Gosling just absolutely crushing it. The soundtrack is beautiful. This film is shot so well. The violence so extreme. I remember rewatching this not long ago and just thinking, like, gosh, this movie's pretty much perfection. And now I'm actually going to be reading the book that's featured in here. My girlfriend, not so much, she hates the fact that I want the jacket, the white jacket with the Scorpion logo on the back. But yeah, Ryan Gosling just absolutely crushing it at this time. You're going to see for 2012, there's another one too. But for 2011, my pick is Nicholas Winding Refn's Drive. Like I said, for 2012, I have another Ryan Gosling pick, and that is The Place Beyond the Pines. Now, I saw this movie when it initially came out, loved it, and then it kind of disappeared. I forgot about it, and then I picked it back up, and I just fell in love with it again. And yes, it is a tale of two movies. The first half is following this character in this plot, and the second half, the character completely changes. I don't want to spoil it if you've never seen it. But I love how ambitious this is storytelling wise. It's a character driven story that works extraordinarily well. It's shot so well. It's as gritty as it gets. But yeah, I remember repicking this up and just my love for it. Just look at the embossing on that. Just my love for it shot to another level. For 2012, I don't really think of any other movie that I love as much as The Place Beyond the Pines. Man, 2013, what an interesting time to be alive and be out of high school, growing up. At this time, I was really kind of diving into weird experimental cinema, kind of expanding my mind into different movies and genres and stuff. And there was actually technically two movies that impacted me pretty well as introduced me to one of my favorite directors. And that is Lars von Trier's Nymphomaniac Volume 1 and 2. I actually found these on Netflix, watched them, and of course, I mean, these movies are extraordinarily sexual. It is what they are, but the storytelling at hand here is absolutely incredible. I remember at the time just being like so enamored by how far it went, and I actually thought it was really brave of Lars von Trier to go there. And then I kind of dug into the rest of his filmography, and I was like, oh man, this guy's been doing this forever. But between the two of these movies, you have I think like 5.5 hours. So you have 2 hours and 28 minutes there, and then 6 hour long story between two volumes. Some people love it, some people hate it. This movie kind of impacted me in a way that I wasn't expecting to hold up as well. But when I rewatched it a couple years ago, I was like, damn, this is so goddamn good. A nearly perfect film, in my opinion. And say what you will about that. I mean, that's a great thing about movies. We all love what we love, and nobody can tell us otherwise. But yeah, my pick for 2013 is Lars von Trier's Nymphomaniac, Volume 1 and 2. And again, thinking about 2014, I'm just like, man, what a difference my life has made. What a change in who I am as a human being in my life. So my film pick for 2014 is one of my favorites, is The Judge. And I know there's a lot of people that don't like this movie, and I just, do you, but I just don't understand. Vincent D'Onofrio is fantastic. Robert Downey Jr., Robert Duvall. I love this movie. To me, it's a perfect drama. It hits every emotion along the way. There's a little bit of thrill, there's a little bit of suspense, there's drama, there's romance, all this stuff going on, and it takes big swings, and it might not land all of them, but you have to appreciate a big swing with a lot of power behind it. And in my opinion, that's what The Judge is, and that's why it's my favorite movie of 2014. So my pick for 2015 might be a little out of left field, but I was just so happy that a great anthology horror film landed in our laps again, and that is Tales of Halloween. It took me forever to find this set. This was like one of my most sought after. But outside of John Carpenter's original Halloween and a couple other Halloween themed classics, ever since I saw this, Tales of Halloween has become sort of the staple in that. I absolutely love a good anthology, but I also love a good anthology where all the stories can kind of wrap up in a clean little, just like very well made little conclusion, and everything fits and works so well and just screams Halloween season to me. That is Tales of Halloween. I'm super happy that I was able to get an anthology, a horror anthology in this list. But yeah, Tales of Halloween. This is my pick for 2015. Ah, yes. 2016. Man. Life was just right around the corner from drastically changing for the better. Absolutely for the better. I mean, life-changing better that I am forever grateful for. But 2016, I had to go with Damien Leone's Terrifier. It's crazy. Terrifier 2 absolutely just took over last year. Did over $10 million at the box office. So nuts. Art the Clown is actually kind of become the new, I would say, like the modern day Jason, the modern day Freddy's, the new kind of symbol for slasher horror, and going against every single rule. I mean, This movie did $10 million at box office with extreme gore, on a low budget. Like everything that mainstream Hollywood hates, this movie kind of jumped in and said, you know what, we can do the same thing, if not more, than half of the big guys are doing. And that pretty much all started more. I mean, you have the All Hallows Eve films, but that all kind of kicked off with Terrifier right here. And that's why it's my pick for 2016. I friggin' love Art the Clown. 2017. Oh my god, this is like. My pick is Chapter 1 of Andy Muschietti's It. I remember just the overwhelming positive feeling. I loved everything about this. So many people. I saw it 3, I think maybe 4 times in the theaters, and every single time the theater was packed. It was a super cool experience. People were making noises and ooh, wow, people were getting scared, having fun. You know, horror felt big again. This felt like an event. Like, the fact that we knew it was going to be broken into 2 parts, and just the quality brought forth here. And say what you will about Chapter 2. I love Chapter 2. But I cannot deny the theatrical experience I had with this and the identity of horror at the time. I just remember sitting down and being like, dude, my favorite genre is at the forefront and just absolutely crushing it. And it felt so big. And still to this day, I throw on this movie and just the music. I friggin' love the soundtrack. The music, the direction, the production quality, everything feels so big, and that's why I love it. Notice my excitement that kind of ramped up with this. I'm tired. I'm all amped up on caffeine. It's like 11 o'clock at night, but whatever. Yeah, I saw this so many times in theaters, and I love this movie to death. So that's why it's my pick for 2017. 2018. Whew. I remember watching my pick for 2018 after kind of listening to a podcast and this movie getting a lot of kind of like festival positive word of mouth, and finally seeing this movie, even though I don't really have much connection to the source material, this movie I thought about kind of nonstop for a year. I was so impacted by it, and in a way of shock and kind of disgust, but also in a way like it did what it meant to for me. And that's going to be Lords of Chaos, the film that's kind of the rise of Norwegian black metal. And say what you will about the accuracy as far as what happened, but you know, between church burnings and murders and a Culkin brother, there's a absolutely so hard to watch suicide scene in this. I mean, the ending, the final, I don't want to spoil it, but the final, you know, murder that happens, the way it's shot and depicted. I mean, this movie just really goes for it, and you kind of come out of it with this kind of like ick, but also this kind of shock and disgust that horror very rarely kind of goes for nowadays. Everyone's kind of playing it safe, and then Lords of Chaos kind of came out and just went balls to the wall and really, you know, went for everything. And I deeply appreciate that. I deeply appreciate Gunpowder and Sky putting this out, and that's why Lords of Chaos is my pick for 2018. So in 2019, who knew that Shudder was going to drop what's become one of my new favorite horror movies of all time, and that is Haunt. I remember this dropping on Shudder, and yeah, I friggin' love this movie. First of all, give me anything that kind of takes place in a haunted house on Halloween. I'm game, but super suspenseful. I loved all the reveals of the characters. I loved the identity of our villains, who they are. You know, now we're finally getting the sequel. I'm kind of excited to see where, I think it's Josh or Scott Beck and Brian Woods. I always get their names a little mixed up. Where they're going to go with this universe. Every Halloween I throw this on, and I just love it time and time again. It's small, it's a low budget, but it's super, super effective. And if you haven't watched Haunt yet, Ronin Flicks put this out. It's still on Shudder, so check it out. I mean, this movie kind of, you know, revitalized streaming for me at the time. I was kind of challenged with, you know, kind of streaming content, streaming originals. I didn't really want to watch them. I wasn't really on board with it yet. This is still kind of pre-COVID. But yeah, so Haunt, one of my favorites. That's why it's my pick for 2019. So we don't have to talk about 2020 as a whole. But we do have to talk about one of my favorite little horror thrillers that came out of it, and that is The Rental, the directorial premiere of Dave Franco. And I've heard kind of bad and great things about this at the time. I picked it up, I decided to take a chance on it, and I loved it. It's this really quiet, secluded little thriller with only four characters, and it works so well. I mean, every single time I revisit it, I just fall in love with it again. The drama works for me. The very, like, when you watch this, you realize that the actual horror or thriller elements of it are very subtle and quiet. It's kind of odd how it works, but it's not everybody's cup of tea. The pacing is a little wonky, but it's shot so well, and it's one of those movies that I've loved, and every single time I watch it, I just fall in love with it again. So that's why my pick for 2020 is The Rental. It's also why I'm very hesitant about Airbnbs, but that's for another video. 2021. Nia DaCosta just absolutely crushed it. You have Monkey Paw Productions, Jordan Peele behind this. That is the requel to Candyman. Say what you will, some of the themes are a little heavy-handed. That's fine. But visually, I love this movie. I love where it went with the idea and the story, kind of how they followed up the original. You have Tony Todd making a guest appearance at the end. It gives me goosebumps every single time. I just thought so much of this movie was effective. I saw it twice in theaters. I saw it by myself, and then I dragged Erica to see it. And yeah, still to this day, I love revisiting this. I don't want to say that I think the Candyman universe should continue, but I'm also kind of like, if this team is behind it, I'm kind of game for it. But 2021, really, no movie that I love kind of more than Candyman, especially the theatrical experience I had was so good. But yeah, my pick, 2021, Nia DaCosta's Candyman. And we've made it to 2022, the last full year. The year I turned 31, because I'm old. And I'm sure nobody is surprised at my pick for 2022. I almost dropped it. But yeah, it's X. I mean, come on. I'd always been a fan of Ty West, but what he did with X, Mia Goth, you have Brittany Snow. There's so much about this movie that I love. The whole 70s era feel, the grain. There was so much goodness about X, the overall impact of it. I remember like sitting in the movie theater with Erica and her being just absolutely disgusted at some moments in this. So much so that she actually will not watch the movie today, and she's still hesitant about seeing Pearl, which is unbelievable to me. But yeah, she was so disgusted by some things that happened in this movie. But I absolutely love what this did for horror in 2022. I love that now we're only a year away from rounding out this trilogy that he created. So one of my favorite horror films of all time, but yeah, definitely my pick for 2022. So I know there were a lot of crazy picks in here, but the cool thing about doing this is that we're picking the films that we love, the films that you, as the creator of your channel, that you love, because your picks are going to be different than mine. And that's pretty much my favorite part of all of this, is the fact that we can all have our opinions and love our movies. And really, people can try to tell us otherwise, but we don't listen to those people. So please, I would love to see yours if you have the time and the dedication, because this has been hours and hours and hours in the making. It's been a long process, but do me a favor, go ahead and follow me over on Instagram. It's the same name. It's Beardedfilmguy. If you are not subscribed to the channel, do me a favor, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, comment down below what your favorite pick was. Also, here's a fun one. Tell me what your favorite year of horror was from 1990 up until 2022. We're in 2023 now. Things could get crazy this year with horror. We just don't know yet. But yeah, thanks for hanging out. Thanks for watching. I'll catch y'all on the next one. Later.